lesson objectives. So in this lesson, we're going to get comfortable with the user interface, the navigation, the various selection methods in Blender. Then secondly, we'll set up our workspace so that we can start performing our 2D motion graphics in the upcoming lessons. All right, let's begin then. So when you come to your splash screen, all you have to do is just simply click off and you would have your default cube. So you bring your mouse over to your default cube and remember you select with the right click. Okay, it's already selected. But then so let's select the camera. So this thing right here is the camera. All right, so let's just right click. Now you see selected, it has this orange color. So let's select our cube one more time with the right click instead of the left click. I know it's a bit confusing, but as I told you, you get used to it. So now our box or our cube is selected. So let's say we want to move this around. All you have to do is press the letter G, and you can move it around. Whilst you're moving it, you don't have to press anything once you hit the letter G. You just press G and then you move your mouse. That is it. You don't have to click anywhere. It's just the letter G and then move your mouse. So if you don't like where the cube is, let's say right now you like where the cube is, then you press the left click. So it registers that. So let me undo that with Ctrl Z. So one more time again, press G, just move your mouse. If you don't like where it is or you don't like what is going on, just right click to undo the action. All right, so that is G and then move around. If you like what is happening, you press the left click to register that action. All right, so let's just leave it here for now. Now let's say you want to change the size of your cube. That is S to scale. So press S on the keyboard and then you can scale it. So by default, it's scaling in all axes proportionally. So but this is what I mean. So if I say I want to scale in just Y, the Y axis, that is the green line. I do this and it scales just in the Y axis. If I want to scale in, let's say, the Z axis. So let me undo this. If I want to scale just in the Z axis, I press the letter Z and it scales just in the Z axis. That's the blue one, up and down. You can't really see it now until you press Z. So it's scaling up and down. So if I want to scale in the X axis, that's the red line. I press X and I can scale in the X axis. So that's it. Now let's say I also want to rotate it. Okay, so you press R to rotate, R to rotate, and you can scale it in like free form kind of way without constraining it to any axis. So I've just right click to undo my action. So I'm going to do this again, R to rotate, then I press Y to rotate it only in the Y axis. If I want to rotate it only in the X axis, I press X and now it's constrained only in the X axis. If I wanted to rotate on only the Z in the X axis. Simple as that. So let's if you want to delete this cube, just come and then whilst it's selected, press delete on your keyboard and then it disappears. If you want to introduce a new shape, press Shift A. That brings up your add menu and then we'll go to mesh, go to cube and then left click. So now we have our cube over here. So now let's go over the basic interface or user interface for Blender. So over here at the top bar, we have over here at the top bar in the red, we have the top part here, which is called top bar. Then in the middle, that is the areas. And then finally at the bottom here, you have the status bar in green. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through each of the various parts one by one, but I'm not going to go through every single tool. Other than that, it's going to take forever. So I'll just go through the basic essential tools we're going to be using the most. All right. So let's start with the top bar. So with the top bar, you have your basic file. That is, if you want to create a new Blender file, you can come here. We have the general 2D animation, sculpting and all that. We're going to be working basically in the general. So just say do not save, basically in the general, but then we'll set it up in such a way that we can have or we can perform 2D motion graphics. All right. Then with the open, you can open an existing Blender file, which is pretty obvious. You can save this file as you work, or you can save it as a new file with a different name. All right. So those are the basic things. Import, if you get something online, maybe a Blender file, you can just come and then import it as an OBJ file. If you get something online, it makes work a whole lot easier. Then with the edit, so for here we have the Control Z to undo and then the redo. I hardly ever come here to do my undo actions. I just use the shortcut keys Control Z. Sometimes I do come here for the redo because I sometimes forget that it is Shift Control Z, but then that is it. So Control Z to undo. Now render, when you're done with your work, you want to render your animation, you can come here, render animation, or if you like your image, if you just want that as a still image, as a 3D image, you can just come to render and then image, and then it renders it as a still image. Then with the window, I hardly use display, so I'm not really going to talk about anything over there. So that's basically it with this top section. With the layout, modeling, sculpting, UV editing, we'll be staying primarily in layout and then maybe animation. So you don't have to worry too much. When it comes there, we'll talk more about those things. But then, yeah, we're going to be working primarily in layout. Good. So now let's talk about the areas. That is the middle section. So over here, you have your contextual menu. The reason why it's contextual is because it changes based on the context of the mode you are in. Right now, we are in object mode. You can have edit mode. You can have sculpt mode. You can have vertex mode and so on and so forth. But we're going to be working primarily in object mode and edit mode. All right. So with edit mode, that is where, so if you look at it very closely at the object mode, you notice that you have just about view, select, add an object just at this part. But once I move to edit mode, then a whole lot of things pop up. That's why it's contextual. So based on the mode in which you are, it will change or to present a new set of menus to match that mode. All right. So this is basically this section, the contextual menu, what you need to know about it. So over here are the various views. Sometimes you might be working with a gizmo and you want to turn it off. So let me give you an example. Let's say you come to edit mode, right? So now with edit mode, you can change. So an object is made up of basically, so I've zoomed in. So you can, sorry, I should have said that in the viewing. So to zoom in is basically with your middle mouse button to scroll in, to scroll out. Good. And to, let's say, pan around, to orbit, that is just you hold your middle mouse button and then you can pan around. All right. If you want to, so that's the orbiting, sorry, that's orbiting. You can orbit around your object. If you want to pan, then that's when you hold shift, middle mouse button, and then you can pan around. All right, so that's it. Good. All right, so any object is made up of select. So over here, look at the top left corner. You have your vertex, you have your edges, and then you have your faces. Okay, so with the selections, you can have you can select either a vertex or an edge or a face. But let me select them so it becomes a bit more obvious as to what I'm doing. So vertex select. So if you come here, you see this dot over here. You use the right click to select it, and that is basically the vertex. Then if you want to select that edge, you come here. Then you can select the edge, right click, and I can move the edge around. You see, if I want to edit the face, come here, select the face, and then you can move the face around. That is it. Good. So I wanted to show you something with the gizmos. So imagine you come here and then you press E to extrude. That's like it creates a new face. And then let's come to the top left corner here. And let's turn on our gizmo. Okay, so let's say move. Good. So you see it brings up this gizmo kind of thing for you to move and like select it. But usually I don't like seeing these things. It confuses me a bit. So I just like to come here and then, come here and then deselect it. Good. So that is most of the things you need to know over here. We'll also come to proportional editing, but I would like to talk about it later. I don't overwhelm you too much for now. So that's our contextual menu. The last thing I would like to talk about is the various views. So let's just go to object mode. So over here, you have your viewport shading. This is the default shading that you're working on. You can also come to wireframe. So it's like you're literally seeing through your object. You can come to viewport shading. Okay, so it mimics a bit of light. And then you can come to how it will look like if it's rendered. So the viewport shading displays it in 3D rendered. Okay, so let's just go to this one since it's easier on your computer. So it's best to work in this view most of the time. All right, so that's it with our contextual menu. Let's come to our far left. Okay, so the basic tools that we've talked about. If we go to edit mode, these are the various tools you're going to be working with. Honestly, I've gone through most of the tools you're going to be working with. That is the grab, the rotate, the scale. They are basically over here. But I think it's best to learn these tools, like the more detailed ones, like let's say extruding or poly build or shrink and fatting those things when we are actually using them in our project. All right. So that's just the tools panel on the left. Just keep that in mind. And then on our far right over here, we have the outliner. So it helps you to basically select various elements in your scene, but also helps you know what is going on. All right, you can still just come to the viewport and right click to select. It's not, you don't have to come all the way here and select it, but you can turn off various things out here in the outliner. All right, so now at the bottom over here, you have your properties panel. Okay, so your properties panel, there are quite a number of things you can do over here. So we'll be working with this properties panel a lot, but let me just show you one of the cool things you can do. So let's say you can come to this wrench here, which is a modify tool, come to add modifier, go to array, and it creates like duplicates of whatever you're working with. You can come to the count and then increase it and then adjust that. So there are quite a number of cool things you can do with the properties panel over here when it comes to rendering your scene and all of those things. Everything will take place over here. Selecting your material will also come here. So you can come to the bottom here. Let's just select this one just for demonstration. Let's pick this one. Let's change the color to, let's say, red. You can't see it now because, as I said, remember the various view shading, because this one is lighter on your machine, so it's not going to try and render every single thing you're working with. But if we were to come here to viewport shading material preview, then you can get a sense of that material. Okay, what it looks like. All right, so let's just delete this once and shift A, putting a new cube. All right, then let's come back to the viewport shading. All right, so that is it with our area section. You have the tools on your left, the outliner here, the properties panel here, and over here you can see the various views in which you are viewing your object. You don't necessarily need to come here and click this. You can just do it with your middle mouse button by clicking it and then dragging, and then it moves it around. One last thing I also want to talk about when it comes to viewing is how you can quickly snap to various views. So look to your keyboard next to the number 1, the far left. You see there's something that looks like a tittle sign, looks like a little like apostrophe, like a backtick. So you can click it, hold it, and you have the various views that you can move in. So moving your mouse, you can just come to front, come to back, come to left. They are the same, so it's hard to tell the difference. So let me just make it a rectangle. So how would you make this a rectangle? Obviously, you just press S to scale and then Y to constrain it in the Y axis, and then you have this. Good. So now if I wanted to change the views, I press the back tick close to the number 1, then I can just tick back, and then the various views, I can even come to the camera, see how it looks like in the camera. So you just come here, you don't need to click, you just bring your mouse, hover on that section, and you leave it, and then it changes. All right, then finally let's talk about the status bar at the bottom here. Bring your mouse all the way to the bottom until it changes like this, and then click and then drag, and then over here you have your status bar. So this is where we're going to be doing an animation. So let me just show you real quick an example of what I'm meaning by animation. So if I come here, then come to the auto keying, just select the auto keying, So now it's sort of recording every action we are taking. Press G, press Y to constrain the Y axis. The moment you click, it will register that keyframe in yellow here. Now you can come forward, drag it. Now you come back to the viewport. So you have to be very careful where your mouse is. If your mouse is over here, every command you initiate would largely affect the timeline. But if your mouse is here in the viewport, it will affect the viewport. So let me give an example. If I come here and I press G, you see it's moving the keyframe instead of my object. So I'll right click to undo it. So basically the same functions that work in the viewport also work here. Right click to undo actions. So I'm going to come back to the 3D viewport. My box is already selected. I'll press G, then move it in the Y axis, move it further a bit, and you see another keyframe has registered. So I'm going to come all the way down here to the start and the end so that I reduce the frame that I'm working with, the frame range I'm working with. So it will start with frame number 1 here, move all the way into frame number 52, somewhere about here. So now you come here to preview animation, just come here and then play your animation. And that is it. Simple as that. You've animated, you've done your first animation in Blender, your first 3D animation in Blender. So those are the various views: the top bar at the top, the areas in the middle, the status bar at the bottom that you're going to be using primarily for your animation. Yeah, I think that is all that you need to know for now. Okay, good. So right now we know the various navigation commands. We know what the menus entail. What we're going to do next is we're going to simply set up our workspace for our 2D motion graphics. All right, so this is basically the setup we're going to be doing for every single one of our 2D motion graphics. So let me just come to File, then go to General, then Don't Save. Good. So now what you want to do first is we just press A to select everything and then delete everything. Good. Now press Shift A to bring up your Add menu. Go to Mesh, go to Plane. Good. Now come to the backtick sign close to the number 1 on your keyboard and then go to Top View. Now press S to scale. Press X to scale it in the X axis. Press S again and then Y to scale it in the Y axis. Press S and then just bring your mouse out to scale everything proportionally. Good. Now we're going to introduce our camera to the scene, but first I want us to deselect everything. So you double tap A, so that's A 2 times real quick to deselect everything. Now press Shift A, then come all the way to the bottom here and then add a camera to the scene. You can't see the camera because it's behind the plane. So click the middle mouse button, the wheel, and then drag upwards to reveal your camera. Now with your camera selected, press G to grab it, then press Z and then move your mouse up to move it in the Z plane. Now if I hold the backtick sign close to the number 1 and I move to the camera, I can see through the camera. All right, now if I scroll back, I can see that there's still a lot of let's say there's still a lot of plane behind the camera. I don't want that, so let me just select the plane, press S to scale. I'll just reduce it a bit this way. Good. Then you can scale in this, you can zoom in this way. Good. So this area you see, the one that is brighter than this, is a bit more darker. This is going to be our working area. Everything we animate is going to be happening within this space. All right, good. So the next thing that we'll also introduce is to add some lighting, because we don't have any lighting in this scene. So let's double tap A to deselect everything, Shift A, then add light and then add a sun. Good. You can't see the difference much because we are in the viewport shading solid, which does not render all of the fancy things, the lights bouncing off and the colors and the materials and all that. So the sun is there, you can't see it. If you press the middle mouse button and scroll up, you can see this is the sun over here. You can just right click this, press G and Z and then bring it up. All right, So let's put it behind our camera. All right, so if I press the backtick sign and I go to right, this is what's happening. Our plane is here, our camera is here, our sun is here. So let's just put the sun, press G and then Z and bring it behind the camera. All right, so you can just put it here. So this is the sun right here. This sun right here. This is the camera, and our plane is somewhere around here. It's like it's super thin, so you can't see it. All right, so that's it. So that's the setup you can see. Cool. All right, so let's select this, the view, and this is it. We are all set up and ready to animate. So we're going to do a quick recap of everything we've learned. So we started off by looking at the user interface, the various menus, what the basic essential commands we'll be using the most, the various selection methods like vertex, edge, phase, and all of those neat stuff. And then we set up our workspace for 2D motion graphics, you know, having a camera at the angle and setting up the plane and, you know, getting the perspective right and everything. So those are the major things we learned in this lesson. So in our next lesson, we're going to be creating 2D shapes in Blender. These are the shapes you're going to be typically using in your 2D motion graphics. All right, see you in the next lesson then.